Welcome to a bonus edition of the Ringer WNBA show. Selection Sunday is over. The brackets are set. UCLA, the number 1 overall seed, and then we got South Carolina, Texas, and USC from there. Lots to talk about, guys. I was thinking it's just gonna be me this episode, by the way. Just gonna be me bringing back monologue Seerat for March Madness. Let's start with what I think is the toughest bracket. We will go from the toughest bracket for the 1 seed to the easiest bracket. But we're going to start with the Regional 4 in Spokane, where USC is potentially playing an Elite 8 rematch against UConn, the 2 seed. Guys, this was one of the best games of the year, perhaps the best game of the year, when UConn and USC met up in December. 72-70, USC pulls it out, but oh my God, because here's the thing. That was a very different UConn team. That was a UConn team with no AZ Fudd. That was a UConn team where Jaina El-Elfi was not yet starting. And that was a UConn team. That was a game in which Sarah Strong came within. She had an opportunity to tie the game with 2 free throws at the end, basically powered an entire comeback, and then missed the free throws and then missed a potential game-winning 3 after the second half, in which she just gave USC's bigs everything that they could possibly handle. I expect her to have this game marked on her calendar. I expect UConn overall to want to avenge themselves in this game, and they got very close, despite not being the version of UConn that we are accustomed to. And right now, this is a team that just doesn't really feel like it has a lot of weaknesses. The number 1 defense, number 2 defense. Paige Beckers is basically playing out of her mind. She is at the top of her skill level right now, had a very efficient season, but has also taken on the killer moniker that we've wanted her to. I am so excited for this potential matchup. And if you remember, too, Juju Watkins gave them all that they could handle. Nobody on UConn could deal with her. Paige Beckers is one of the best one-on-one defenders. She just shook her. She just shook her easily. I think she had 29 points on 19 shots in that game. It was one of her most efficient games this season. She had 5 assists. She was incredible that game. I expect nothing less from her. I feel like these are 2 players that are built for the moment. These are players who rise to the spotlight. Now they have, they have kind of the scouting report on each other too. But I really think this game, if it is a matchup, will probably come down to UConn shooting, really. Like, if AZ Fudd has a good shooting night, if Ashlyn Shade has a good shooting night, then you can kind of deal with the potential of, let's say, having to play Ice Brady more, which you probably will against this USC front line. That will probably give problems to 2 freshmen in Sarah Strong and Jaina and El-Elfi. But hey, look, like I said with Sarah Strong, it's a big matchup for her. She really, really thrived up until those 2 free throws. It was just, I think maybe just freshman jitters, and now she has an opportunity to just erase that in what might be like maybe the most watched game. We'll see about that. And I do wonder if the committee, knowing that this was the most watched game in women's basketball this year, wanted to make sure that they got that matchup before the Final Four. But that does mean that one of UConn or UCLA definitely will not be making the Final Four. And right now, I think you guys can take it from the tone of my voice right now that I think it's probably going to be USC. It's going to be a tight game, but I just feel like UConn is playing at the height of their powers right now. USC will be motivated, though, coming off that loss in the Big Ten tournament. And any time that they, come across an opponent that can't really deal with Juju, I feel like I do tend to want to give them the advantage. And she is growing at the speed of light right now. I'll have a big breakdown on all of this on theringer.com, where I talk about her growth, and I'll talk about Paige and a lot of the more intriguing players in the tournament. So, she's kind of in a race against the scouting report. Most nights she wins it. Sometimes she loses it, but every single time she learns something. So that overall is just going to be such a great matchup. But just moving on now to the rest of this region, it's kind of a doozy. You've got Kentucky at number 4. They're one of my favorite teams to watch this season. I love Georgia Amore. I love Kara Strack and Tioni Key, just two really versatile, fast bigs who can handle the ball. But if they run into USC in the Sweet 16, I just feel like it's going to be the end of the road for them. Kennedy Smith is just built to give somebody like Georgia Amore problems. And USC's bigs, like they're not just big, they're not just deep, but they're also really athletic. I feel like they're going to be able to keep up with Kentucky. So I don't know. It might be goodbye. It might be goodbye. But look, Georgia Amore is just one of those players. She's one of the best pick and roll players in the country. She hits like these magical, just basketball gods love her type of shots at the end of the clock. She's just one of those players that can definitely go on a tear, and get anything done. So that's a game I'll be watching. Iowa is also in this region as well as a number 6 seed. This is a team that has beaten USC, granted on one of USC's worst nights, and a night that I think kind of propelled them to becoming the more consistent offensive team that they need to be. But I do think that, part of the reason Iowa got a 6 seed is they're a little bit better than we think, maybe. The collective we, I guess, because ever since they lost 5 straight games, they have that win against USC. They came within a possession of beating Ohio State, came within a possession of beating UCLA. They're shooting really well from 3. They've tightened up their defense. And, they also have the experience, like this is a team that has had like a lot of these players have made deep runs before. And also freshman Ava Hayden playing her best basketball, bolstering Iowa's front court rotation. Like she is going to have a huge challenge potentially in Reagan Beers, Oklahoma with the number 3 seed. Reagan Beers just absolutely unguardable at the center position. I do kind of expect Oklahoma to win that game. They are the higher seed. They have the matchup advantage. I just feel like it's going to be a lot for Ava and Hannah Stalkey to be dealing with all of that. And then for UConn, I think, the way that they deal with Reagan Beers is also going to be pretty interesting. I just think, again, it can't be understated. Sarah Strong has to be huge in this tournament. And I think she will be huge. I would expect UConn to pull that one out as well. I don't really see that one being an upset, but I do think that we've got some really, really interesting matchups in the Regional 4. All right, moving on now to the Regional 3. Birmingham, Texas, the number 1 seed in a field that is going to include Ohio State at number 4, Tennessee at number 5, Michigan at number 6, one of my favorite teams, but I'm bearing the lead here, guys. Because the number 3, Notre Dame. This is like the conference that has like the tough teams that have had really bad runs lately and have therefore been punished, which actually then goes on to punish Texas because they could potentially have to deal with these teams. Notre Dame has beaten Texas already. One of their only losses in the season came early in the season against a Notre Dame team that, granted, looks a lot better than they do right now, but I think there's a couple things that will translate. First of all, Notre Dame just has to play better defense than they've been playing as of late. They've lost 3 of their last 5 games. It's a team that thrives on defense. A third of Hannah Hidalgo's buckets come on the transition. A third of Hannah Hidalgo's buckets come in transition. She is the engine and the fuel there. She obviously averages a lot of steals as well. So they've got to get it together on that end. I would love to see more Kate Koval involved. Part of, I think, the story for Notre Dame is their defense was elite earlier in the season when Kate Koval was playing a lot of minutes. Then they had Maddie Westball come back from injury, Liza Carlin, and it feels like Kate has just been sort of sidelined. And I don't really understand why. They have slid defensively since. She's a great rim protector. I get that she's a freshman. This is somebody that they're going to need against Taylor Jones, Kyla Oldacre, that huge Texas front court. And they're going to need her against TCU and Sedona Prince, who have the number 2 seed as well in this region. So it's kind of a tough one for Notre Dame in that way as well. You're kind of going up against teams that could really just get them clogged up on the offensive end. And if they take care of the ball and don't let Notre Dame get going in transition, I don't really know. I think, it's just a big question, like kind of how defensively engaged they are going to be given what they've done in their last 5 games. But again, more Kate Koval would be great. In the Texas matchups, Sonia Citron did an incredible job on Madison Booker, who shot, I think, 33% in that game. One of her worst games of the season. Pretty much the only defender not named Bree Hall, who I feel like, can just stop Madison Booker one-on-one. And from there, if you can do that, and Texas, as we know, does not shoot threes, if they're not winning the offensive rebounding battle, I could definitely see a motivated, focused, defensively focused version of Notre Dame beating Texas. But look, that game went down to overtime last time, so I expect it to be a close one if they do match up. We also have Tennessee and Ohio State, the number 5 and the number 4. That'll be an interesting matchup. Just 2 teams that love to full court press. 2 of the my favorite full court press teams in the 2 of my favorite full court press teams in the NCAA. And I'm kind of curious what we get out of Tennessee. They're a team that I'm really looking towards to see what version of them are they going to be. They got upset in the SEC tournament final by Vanderbilt. It feels like they were tired. That feels like what Kim Caldwell basically said. Look, we need a rest. We didn't really manage the players' load the way that we need to. Tennessee, if you listen to this podcast, is one of the most fascinating teams to me. Hockey substitutions, full court press all game. They get a ton of threes up as well, which just makes them a huge X factor in this tournament. If they can just get on a heater and they get back to brass tacks defensively, I also think that even if they don't necessarily make the changes that they need to make on the defensive end, just as far as their press goes, I feel like a lot of teams have started to understand how to play against it. I actually don't see a lot of teams in this region that I worry about giving them trouble. I think if they play Michigan, that could be interesting, but they probably won't. They're on pretty different sides of the bracket. If they end up playing Notre Dame, that could be interesting as well. That one I could see being interesting, but that would already mean Tennessee makes the Elite 8, which would be tough. In reality, they're probably an out against Texas, but Texas-Tennessee could be a really, really interesting game because they both neutralize each other's strengths. These are 2 teams that are great defensively. They're great at suppressing the three-pointer, and they are 2 teams that kind of struggle against teams that can match their physicality as well. If Tennessee doesn't have all their advantages on the glass that allow them to outshoot opponents, then they usually don't win those games. But Texas also really needs the offensive rebounding edge. And look, if this is a team in Tennessee that can just hit its threes, they're night and day as far as 3-point output goes. I think Tennessee shoots more threes than just about anybody else in the nation. And Texas gets the second least amount of their points from the 3-point line. So that could be an early upset. Honestly, I could see that. If Tennessee comes out and plays like the Tennessee that we saw earlier in the season, Texas might not even make it to Notre Dame. And that's also saying, if you guys are making your brackets, I know Texas is very highly rated. Maybe I'm personally biased. This is just not a team that I believe in a lot. I never really have. I just feel like they don't get enough consistent offense to make a deep run. And Tennessee just might not be a team that you want to run into. And then from there, man, Notre Dame, Tennessee would be a fascinating game if that one happens. Just when you consider the full court press, consider how much Notre Dame loves to run in transition, the love for chaos that Hannah Hidalgo and Olivia Miles have, the way that they would deal with that type of coverage. I could see that just being a really exciting and fun game to watch if we do get it. All right, now we'll move on to UCLA, who did get the number 1 overall seed. I think really well deserved. I think, when you add on the fact that UCLA also beat South Carolina head to head, the fact that South Carolina got blown out at home by UConn, and then UCLA went and won the Big Ten tournament in a game that they absolutely had to win, in a game that, showed me so much of what I need to see out of them and out of Lauren Betts, as far as just having that killer instinct, being willing to just kind of keep going down into the post over and over again, get USC's bigs into foul trouble. I loved Corey Close's adjustments too. I feel like she kind of coached maybe one of the most important games of her career. UCLA is just really riding high right now. to me, like, they are the scariest team in the NCAA, with Lauren Betts playing the way that she is playing. And I think that they ended up playing in a region that is really favorable to the matchups that they could potentially struggle with. Like, I just don't see a lot of bigs. They have LSU at the number 3. LSU is one of just a team to watch as far as the injury report goes. Flau'jae Johnson and Nisa Mora were both in a boot at the Selection Sunday watch party that they had in Baton Rouge. You obviously hope that they're both going to be okay, but that's something to watch. But even beyond that, man, like, LSU just does not have the centers. They don't have the depth in their front court to be able to deal with UCLA. So as much as, like, yeah, we're getting this rematch of the Elite Eight matchup where LSU beat UCLA last season, it's just a very different team. Like, Angel Reese is in the WNBA now. And this has kind of been their issue all season. They just have not had anybody that's been able to replace the size and the rim protection that she provides down low. So I just feel like that would be a pretty easy W for UCLA. And then from there, I just don't, like, maybe Aaronette Vonleh could give UCLA some problems, could give Lauren Betts some problems. But this is just not, I'm not worried about any of the teams in UCLA's bracket at all. Shout out to Harvard, number 10 seed. They're playing Michigan State. Just, awesome for the program. Harmony Turner. And same with Florida State as well. 6th seed with Tanaya Latson. So definitely some fun individual matchups on that side of the bracket as well. Like, we could get Florida State LSU in the second round. I think that would be a really fun game. And I mean, Florida State, if LSU continues to have health issues, actually an interesting upset watch in that one. And all right, last but not least, the Regional 2, Birmingham, South Carolina. South Carolina did not get the number 1 overall seed, but I do think that they might have the easiest path to the Final Four. Let's just talk about South Carolina for a second, just, what they've been able to do in the last few weeks, because this was a team that in the beginning of the season, they had that loss to UCLA. They're clearly missing Carmela Cardoso. They haven't really figured out how they want to play on the offensive end yet. They look night and day from that team at this point. Like, Chloe Kitts and Sanaya Fagan, even with the Ashlyn Watkins injury, have just upped their physicality. I love their high-low game. They are just two awesome players who are growing, and really, like, modernizing, stretching out their games. Chloe Kitts as a passer has just been incredible to watch these last few weeks. Malaysia Fulwiley, I feel like, is taking the leap. You definitely see more maturity in her game on the defensive end. She is locking down opponents. She's locking down Georgia Amor. She locked down Haley Van Lith. And she's just such a wild card. I'm really just excited to watch what she does in this tournament. Tessa Johnson, after having a tough start, is just really rounding into form. Also said that she made a point to work on her rebounding. And that's just what you got to love about South Carolina, the way that they play as a team. Like, they know that they need to be a better rebounding team. That was one of their issues, especially after Watkins went down. And, then you got, like, Tessa Johnson, a guard who comes off the bench. She says, I'm going to, take the onus upon myself to do things like that. But I think Dawn just has a lot of confidence in her young players right now, which I think is huge. And this is a classic South Carolina story, right? Like, going into the season, not really sure how they're going to be without their seniors. And then just throughout the season, we see this collective growth. And now they just feel like one of the deepest teams in the NCAA. And look, they're in a bracket where I don't see a lot that I am worried about. Like, number 2, Duke. Shout outs to Duke. Like, this is nothing against Duke. I think Duke really deserves this. I think this is a huge win for Carol Lawson and what she's done with that program. And I think that they're a team that can definitely, they can give you problems if they start to get hot, because they're a great defensive team. And they're really, like, their issue has really been shooting. But I just think at the end of the day, with the way that South Carolina plays defense, I just don't think that Duke is really going to be able to get their offense going much at all if they do end up meeting. But at the same time, look, like, Reagan Richardson can really get hot. She went off in the first 2 games of the tournament last year, averaged 27 points, 7 boards on 58% shooting from the field, hit 5 threes against Ohio State. She's had a tougher year, but, like, if she can get her shot going, Alushi Akinanawa has been amazing. A sixth player who won ACC most outstanding player in the tournament. Things like that don't happen. Defensively, she's been awesome. Maybe she could give the South Carolina guards a little bit of trouble. They did a great job against Notre Dame, Hannah Hidalgo stopping her in the half court, like just really, really like cutting off the valve for that team. So, I definitely don't want to write Duke off, but it just feels like with the way that South Carolina is playing right now, they're just a bit of a buzzsaw. Duke versus Vanderbilt, who got like the 7th seed, is also potentially an interesting matchup. Like I love the backcourt matchup there with Michaela Blakes, but also the way that Duke likes to run their offense. They're very movement heavy. They love passing the ball. And Vanderbilt is a team that is not highly ranked defensively, but with Camille Pierre kind of anchoring things there, they're a team that can switch. They're versatile. Camille Pierre, after not getting an all-SEC selection, is still kind of on a heater right now. She's on a bit of a tear, and Michaela Blakes, she's just liable to get hot in any given night. I do think Duke has the defenders to keep up with her. Like they're kind of maybe like one of the few teams that does, but that's just a matchup to watch. I think it'll be interesting. And then from there, like looking at these teams, like I don't worry about North Carolina, the number 3 seed against SEC at all. Alabama, SC at 5 could be an interesting matchup as well. Maryland got the 4 seed, but Cheyenne Sellers has really been struggling. She's been hurt. She only scored 2 points in the Big Ten tournament. They were upset by Silas Swords and Michigan. And they're just not a team that is really, in my opinion, like on the level of a 4 seed, just given how they've been playing right now. So yeah, it's strange. Even though they didn't get the number 1 overall seed, I do feel like South Carolina probably got the best schedule, but it is pretty close, especially considering the matchups that UCLA is getting. Like, I just don't think that there's anybody there that can really give them any trouble. Whereas, let's say they were playing in like the regional 3, as opposed to Texas. Like, I think Tennessee would be an interesting matchup. I think they've done away with Ohio State. Notre Dame would be a fascinating matchup, the one that I would love to see. But we will not see that matchup unless it's in the Final Four. And let's talk a little Final Four potentials right now. Right now, let's say it's chalk. If it's chalk, then we get South Carolina, Texas in the Final Four. Would love to see that rematch. I think that's just been on everybody's list. I'm sure it's on Texas's list after they lost the SEC Finals to them. 2-1 regular season series. The Madison Booker versus Bree Hall shit talk battle. Madison Booker has really struggled against Bree Hall, but decided to tell her that she couldn't guard her in their second game when Texas was able to get a victory. But overall, Booker shooting 26% on the season against South Carolina in 3 games. And I'm sure she'd love to have another shot, and but I just love, like that's the beauty of like conference play. I love it when you play enough that these teams start to really hate each other, which brings me to USC and UCLA being a potential Final Four matchup. This is like the one that kind of, I guess, that's sort of the trade-off that the committee and the fans get with a potential UConn USC matchup is we won't get the USC UCLA round 4 that I think everybody wants to see. But if we do, I think that's just a huge matchup. I think that there are things that Juju Watkins had already started to figure out. Like I was watching back the USC UCLA game, and by the fourth quarter, like towards the end of the fourth quarter, I think Juju had kind of figured out how to deal with Lauren Betts switching up so high on her, and hit a midi, hit a 3, had that steal, and really almost brought him back into that game. I kind of forgot about that, just given how dramatic it felt for UCLA to make that comeback. But I do wonder what would have happened if there were 2 or 3 minutes more left in that game. And hey, I would love to see 40 more minutes of that potential matchup. And then moving on from there, like we're going to talk predictions. I'm not finalizing my predictions yet. I'm going to take a little bit more time to think about it. But right now, the few things that I will tell you that I am predicting is I actually do not think, as I talk through this right now, I don't think that Texas is going to make it out of the Regional 3 in Birmingham. I think that the combination of, two teams in Notre Dame and Tennessee that need to start, being who they say they are. But I think that at least one of them will. I think that's just kind of a lot. And I think that ultimately Notre Dame will end up in the Final Four. Notre Dame SC would be an incredible matchup. I would love to see that matchup. I would be hard pressed to try to make any predictions on that matchup. But one thing I will say is that I do think that UConn is going to be playing in the championship game. And I think UConn right now, I have to think about it. I have to think about what UCLA versus UConn would look like. Obviously, I think Lauren Betts at her best is going to be unguardable in a game like that. But UConn does have the front court pieces, and I just think that Paige is going to do it. You know, I think that she is probably going pro. I think that it is so important for her to win a title for UConn. I think that for the program, it would be huge. They haven't won a title since 2016, so it would be a huge feather in the cap of Gino Auriemma to be able to win a title in this, in this new era of college basketball where everyone has sort of caught up to UConn as well. And they've got the experience factor as well. I think they've wanted it for so long. I'm sure the Final Four from last year is lingering in their memories. And I think that's just a huge aspect to these things. It's like not just experience, but it's sort of the pain of the heartbreak that you endure when you have experiences like that can really motivate you to make sure that that never happens again. So I just feel like when when it just gets really hard, when let's say we're in a really close game between UCLA and UConn, I think Paige Beckers is going to remember that she only shot 17 times against Iowa in the Final Four. And I think she's just going to make sure that in what could be the final college game of her career, that she goes out swinging. I believe that about her right now. I think she's just never, it cannot be understated how at the top of her game she is right now this whole season. Like she has a 3.9 assist to turnover ratio. That's how well she's reading the game. It is miles ahead of anybody else in the nation. She's obviously shooting the ball incredibly well, always has, but her command of the game has just never been better. And I just feel like she is going to be able to pick apart anything that's thrown at her. And on the UCLA end of it, I kind of wonder if they need one more tough loss to really, really understand what's necessary for them. And I guess that's not necessarily a tactical answer, but I just do think that all of these bigger things come into play, especially as you get into these huge crowds and the spotlight and you're dealing with the media and the Final Four environment and all of that. It's just something that UConn has done before. And again, I am really, really hard pressed to find a genuine weakness in a healthy UConn team. I'm also in a matchup like that, like the potential health of Aubrey Griffin is going to be huge too. And everything is huge, but just, having a senior that can, play in your front court and, also speed things up for you, give him a different look is interesting too. So yeah, look out for that too. I'm kind of curious if she's able to go. She didn't play in the Big East final. So that's definitely something to watch. But look, everybody else for UConn is healthy, and there have been very few moments in, this tenure for Paige and AZ that you've been able to say that. So hey, look, I'm just grateful for that and excited for them that they kind of get to experience this run together. Potentially, I'm sure that they have both wanted to be able to be on the court at the same time. And I just think like even things like that, like when you don't get those opportunities, like I think you are more likely to make the most of them. So yeah, I think for now, UConn is my pick to win the national title. But I'm going to continue to think about it, and we will be back with a regularly scheduled episode on Wednesday. And I'm going to be writing for the site, and I will have a finalized bracket pretty shortly here. But right now, that's where my head's at. I'm curious what you guys think. Send thoughts, comments, prayers, hatred, whatever. I want to hear it all because, look, it's March, right? Nothing anybody ever thinks is going to happen actually ever happens. And that's what you got to love about it. That's the best part about all of this, and I am excited to look stupid. That's because that's kind of the whole point of this. And I'm excited to see who's holding the trophy and cutting down the nets on April 6th. This is going to be really fun next few weeks. Thanks for tapping in with me, and I'll be back soon. Thank you to Brian Waters for producing as always. I know that he is half listening to me and half watching his unrivaled team. Thank you so much, and we will talk to you guys soon.